Picture this. It's midnight in the Caribbean. An oil tanker cruises forward like it thinks tonight will be just another boring shift. Then it notices something behind it. A military ship, moving like a cop car that hasn't turned its siren on yet. No shots fired, no warnings shouted, just that uncomfortable feeling of being followed on a dark road. This isn't a movie trailer or Netflix cliffhanger. It's an actual situation playing out at sea right now. Over the past weeks, the U.S. has been chasing and seizing oil tankers linked to Venezuelan crude exports. Then the plot twist. One of those tankers wasn't heading home. It was reportedly sailing toward China. Venezuela reacted fast, calling the U.S. a pirate. Not as an insult, but as a legal accusation. China jumped in too, saying this wasn't law enforcement, but a serious violation of international rules at sea. Meanwhile, the U.S. says, "Relax, this isn't piracy. It's just sanctions enforcement." Simple as that. So here's the hook. When a navy stops civilian ships, where's the line between rules and piracy? To the US, this whole chase starts with one idea. Sanctions only work if they actually bite. Think of sanctions like a speed limit. Useless if nobody ever gets pulled over, so on paper, Venezuela is heavily sanctioned, especially its oil exports, the government's main cash machine. But oil doesn't magically stop moving just because someone signs a document in Washington. Instead, it slips through renamed ships, shadow fleets, and paperwork that feels straight out of a spy movie. From Washington's point of view, that turns sanctions into tough talk with zero follow-through. So enforcement becomes the point, actually stopping ships, not just tweeting warnings about them. Chasing tankers is like finally flashing the police lights after years of empty threats. Officially, the U.S. says it's targeting illegal oil trade and sanction evasion, nothing more. Unofficially, there's another layer, credibility, proving sanctions aren't just diplomatic cosplay. If tankers keep getting through, everyone learns the same lesson. Rules are optional. Stopping a few ships raises the price for insurers, buyers, and shipping companies worldwide. And yes, China is watching closely because this isn't just about Venezuela anymore. So if sanctions follow ships across oceans, geography suddenly stops being a safe shield. From the US perspective, this isn't piracy. It's the system reminding everyone it still works. Now flip perspectives and imagine you're standing on that tanker's deck, watching the ocean and the ship behind you. This isn't US territory, not even close. It's the open ocean, basically international waters Wild West. From Venezuela's side, this feels less like traffic enforcement and more like someone taking your car on the highway. That's why Caracas went straight for the nuclear word, piracy. Not trash talk, but a legal accusation. To them, a powerful navy grabbing civilian ships looks uncomfortably close to classic pirate behavior. China jumped in fast, but not because it loves Venezuela. This is about something much bigger. Beijing called the seizure a serious violation of international law and freedom of navigation. Freedom of navigation is basically the Wi-Fi of global trade. Everything breaks when it's unstable. If big powers can stop ships at sea, smaller countries start checking their own shipping routes nervously. China's real fear isn't one tanker, it's precedent, the idea that this becomes the new normal. Today it's Venezuelan oil. Tomorrow it could be any cargo someone powerful doesn't like. That's when words like blockade start popping up, even though nobody declared a war. To critics, this looks less like neutral rules and more like power deciding what's allowed. So the argument isn't just legal, it's about who actually controls the rules of the ocean. And here's the twist. History has seen this movie before. Countries using ships to fight economic wars. Let's rewind a few centuries back to a time when global trade meant wooden ships and very sharp cannons. Empires were fighting nonstop, but navies were expensive, slow to build, and never quite big enough. So governments came up with a shortcut, basically outsourcing naval warfare to private businessmen. They handed out something called a letter of marque, a license that said, you can pirate legally. With that paper, private ships could hunt enemy merchants without being called criminals. Think of it like Uber, but for warships. Bring your own boat, get paid per capture. The prize wasn't glory, it was money, cargo, ships, anything that could be sold. For governments, this was genius. Weaken enemies and let private investors pay the costs. Britain became especially good at this, using privateers to choke rivals' trade routes. Instead of sinking warships, privateers went after what really mattered, commerce and cash flow. To Britain, these crews were patriots. To their enemies, they were just pirates with better branding. That argument never really went away. It just waited for a new era to come back. Privateering worked, but it also caused chaos, abuse, and plenty of diplomatic headaches. Over time, countries realized this system was powerful, but also dangerously uncontrollable. Eventually, most powers agreed to ban privateering and keep naval force firmly in state hands. On paper, the era of legal pirates was supposed to be over for good. But the logic behind it, attacking trade instead of armies, never really disappeared. It simply changed outfits, swapping flags and cannons for laws, sanctions, and enforcement agencies. Which brings us back to today, and those tankers moving quietly through the Caribbean night. Because when people say new pirates, this is the history they're thinking about, even if they don't say it. So let's line them up side by side. Old school privateers and modern sanctions enforced at sea. First, the similarities, because yes, there are plenty, and that's why the pirate label keeps coming back. In both cases, warships aren't the main target. Civilian trade and money flows are. Instead of winning battles, the goal is to make doing business painfully expensive. And both operate in that gray zone called the ocean, where borders feel vague and authority feels fuzzy. That's why, from the receiving end, it often feels less like rules and more like raw power. Now for the big differences, because this is where the analogy starts to break down, and privateers worked during declared wars. Basically a chaos-accepted period in international politics. What we're seeing today happens without a war declaration, under peacetime sanctions and legal frameworks. Back then, pirates got paid directly. Capture a ship, split the loot, everyone's happy. Today, there's no treasure chest, just court cases, frozen assets, and compliance paperwork. Another difference, privateers were private actors, while modern enforcement is done by the state itself. That matters because state action changes the legal language, from piracy to international responsibility. So calling this 21st century piracy feels catchy, but legally it's far more complicated. Still, the comparison sticks because the feeling, trade under threat at sea, hasn't really changed. Up to now, this story feels Caribbean, but zoom out and it connects to a much bigger map. For years, the main stage of US-China tension at sea has been the South China Sea. There, the argument sounds familiar. Freedom of navigation versus national security. Warships sail, drills happen, statements fly. Everyone knows the rules are being tested. Now, here's the shift. Similar rule testing is showing up far from Asia in the Caribbean. The Caribbean has always been close to the US, strategically, politically, historically. But over the past decade, China has quietly increased its economic footprint across Latin America. Loans, ports, infrastructure, and energy deals, nothing flashy, but very real. Venezuelan oil heading toward China is part of that broader picture, not an isolated case. So when the US stops ships here, China doesn't see a local issue. It sees a strategic signal. It's like discovering the referee is enforcing the rules only on your side of the field. Smaller Caribbean and Latin American countries are watching quietly, not rushing to pick sides. For them, this isn't ideology. It's survival, trade access, and economic breathing room. That's how regional disputes turn global, when rules in one sea start echoing in another. And suddenly the question isn't about Venezuela, it's about who sets the rules and where. Let's go back to that tanker, still moving through the Caribbean night, engines humming, no headlines on board. Out here, there's no courtroom, no judge. Just ships, signals, and whoever shows up with authority. History tells us this isn't new. Seas have always been places where rules get tested first. Once those rule breakers were wooden ships flying black flags across the Caribbean. They didn't just steal gold, they shook empires and forced new rules into existence. Today, the flags are different. The ships are steel, and the weapons are laws and sanctions. But the feeling is familiar. Trade under pressure, power at sea, and rules under negotiation. That's why the word pirate keeps coming back, even in a world full of lawyers and treaties. Not as a joke, but as a warning about what happens when power outruns consensus. Once Caribbean pirates shook the world. So in the 21st century, is the Caribbean facing new pirates?